I'm Carol Spieckerman, and this is Spieckerman Speaks Retail, presented by MarketScale. Hi, this is Carol, and welcome to episode 17 of Spieckerman Speaks Retail, where we navigate retail from now to next through my latest retail trajectories and through interviews with industry experts who are charting the course. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with one of those experts today for this latest Voices of Retail Next interview. I actually think it's perfect timing. It's a great follow-on to our last interview where we talked about all things brick and mortar. Well, today we're going to expand that conversation with a retail expert who started her career working on the shop floor, but has since become responsible for over $1.5 billion with a B in P&L as she served in executive roles with iconic brands like Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic, and now as VP of Retail for fashion innovator, The RealReal. Courtney Hawkins is a true retail innovator with multifaceted experience across retail operations, merchandising, inventory management, talent development, and more. She's been in the thick of things during some of the most dynamic and disruptive times that retail has ever seen. So I'm super excited to have her here with us today to share her take on how retail is evolving on multiple fronts because she has seen it all. So Courtney and I also share a passion around mentoring women in business, which I just love. Not to mention dogs. We both are dog lovers. Mine now are safely tucked away so that they don't steal the show. But it is so great to have you here, Courtney. Thank you for making time to be with us today.
Carol, I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. When I look at your resume, just your career in general and the breadth of it, it looks so intentional. So was it? I mean, what got you into retail? Was that a happy accident or something that you were just passionate about from the get-go?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both, honestly. I will tell you, way back from the time I was a little girl, probably about 5, 6 years old, I loved shopping. And I loved shopping, whether at that time it was through a catalog or going to a mall with my grandmother. I've always loved fashion. And I've always loved the latest trends and style, and seeing what that does also to culture and industry. So it just so happened when I started in retail, I didn't know that I set out for a career in retail, but I just fell in love with the business. And there were several reasons why. I love the dynamic business because it changes every day. Honestly, there is not one day that is the same. So if you're an innovative problem solver, retail is the best industry to be in. But not to mention the people aspect of it. You're really, as a leader in a retail brick and mortar, or whether it's anywhere in business, you're really impacting people's lives and you're impacting the customer and also the people that work within the stores. And I always took that to heart and a huge responsibility for the people and the teams that I've led. And then I just also love problem solving to drive the business and the outcome being the results. You basically, as a brick and mortar retailer, you get your business report card every single day to see how you're doing, and you can absolutely adjust and be agile to make change. And that is also part of the reason why I fell in love with retail.
I love that because you really obviously embrace so many of the things about retail that maybe others find disruptive. It is constant change. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility for other people, shoppers and consumers. That's really great just to see that you've had that passion from the start and continue to channel it. And as part of that, you've seen one of the bigger evolutions that's happened in retail firsthand, where stores are by no means dead. They've actually become critical to retailers' digital aspirations. So what are your thoughts on the relationship or maybe even the differences between online and in-store right now and the role that each one of them plays in driving the customer experience?
Especially right now with COVID. I mean, we have seen an acceleration with consumers adopting a multi-channel way of shopping. And when I think about the relationship, whether it's a brick and mortar, online, and then all the other services like buy online, pick up in store, you have it, you have delivery overnight, like all these different elements of, curbside pickup. There are so many different elements, so many different options for customers to be able to shop the brands that they have to be a symbiotic relationship between online and stores. And when I think about when a customer shops online, there is an experience there. Absolutely. You can see the product, you understand the pricing, You can select the product and you can have it shipped to you without any type of interaction, potentially with a person. But if you want the true brand experience and you want to feel a brand come to life, you go into a store. And that's where you get to touch and feel the product. You get to physically see it with your own eyes. You get to understand the true vision of a brand coming to life through the people that are employed in there. So when I think about what's important to retail today, it's that in all aspects in which a customer can shop, that all senses are explored, but that the relationship feels the same and you know that you're in the same brand, whether you're in stores or whether you're online.
That brand continuity is what every retailer wants, but it can be really elusive.
It really can be, especially when I think about the infrastructure of a headquarter environment. You know, you've got retailers right now that are legacy brick and mortar that are adopting online, and then you have direct to consumer retailers that are going into brick and mortar. And so the infrastructure at the headquarter environment to understand that you're not looking at channels, you're looking at a customer, one customer experience that shop multiple channels, and to make sure that the vision holistically comes to life and is unified is so critical to maintaining the customer's loyalty, if you will, and also coming, because customers coming back to continue to shop.
You just alluded to something that is another big development in retail where you've got these two journeys to omnichannel that are being reversed out. You have brick and mortar players that have had to get up to speed with digital, and now you do have digitally native brands that are pushing further into physical retail. What are your thoughts on bricks to clicks versus clicks to bricks? Are there advantages to one over the other, or what are your thoughts? Because I know you've experienced both.
Yeah, both in a short amount of time, I feel like. So I think going from the stores, when you have a legacy retailer, I think you have to start with like the purpose of the store and where the store real estate is. And that's changing. I mean, the mall is evolving, whether it's going to be relevant the way that it always has been or not. It is not looking likely. And a lot of legacy retailers have their real estate invested into malls. And that the legacy retailer is gonna have to look at where are their stores? Is it the best real estate? Because having more stores doesn't necessarily mean more profit. It could actually be a drain on profit. So with the online experience, you're going to want to have stores where customers want to shop and where you got to meet the customer where they are. And then online has to come in and complement that as well. And there has to be that symbiotic relationship. I think that's where the direct to consumer actually has a bit of advantage because they're just starting to build their store fleet. So the real estate aspect becomes really important for those direct to consumer brands because they're going to be able to start from scratch. The mall, they don't have to go into malls. They can look at lifestyles. They can look at different ways in order to where to put their stores. And those are growing. Like you think about downtown areas or even local communities in bigger cities that aren't necessarily typical traditional retail. And so they're at I think a bit of a more advantage than specialty retail today.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying the digitally native brands can be more selective and more strategic about their brick and mortar locations rather than just making a pure scale play.
I completely think that today.
And not to mention the fact that these direct to consumer brands usually have quite a bit of data that helps them make better decisions when they actually open stores.
Yeah, because they can see where their customers are currently purchasing from to say this is the right zip code for us. This is where we should absolutely be. Versus a specialty retail could be like we have deals with these landlords and we have to stay within these malls to get these other deals in these better centers, which can dilute the fleet, if you will, over time.
That's a great point. Before in the old days, it was always if you saw one store, the intention was to have many, many more. And these days, it's not necessarily the case because some of these markets can just be addressed digitally, right?
Absolutely. And then you look at like where some of the consumer goods, they're expanding into brick and mortar really quickly and expanding stores and seems to make sense to their business model. So I think it's all about the brick and mortar space is about the business model, the consumer, the location. and making sure that it makes sense for the long-term future, but also not getting tied up into legacy deals that could hinder the future of the brand.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thinking of the store expansion and the role of the store, these days, every retailer that's made it this far is a multi format operator. Even dollar stores, they're now opening new urban concepts. Walmart is now a multi format operator. They're by no means just a big box retailer. Now you see more brands opening these big flagship stores, brands like Nike, to control their destiny and really tell their brand story in a compelling way. What are your thoughts on multi-format strategies?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think it starts to depend on the brand and where store. I think you have to have like, in looking at for different formats for different brands. What I think is cool, I think about American Eagle as an example. They've been testing different formats for years and they're not afraid to go in, try a different format. Sometimes they scale and sometimes they do not, but they're trying. And I think that for retailers, specialty retailers or big box retailers, continuing to evolve and try and test is going to be really important to staying relevant. Think about the department store. I think that's where the department store, quite honestly, fell flat. They didn't continue to evolve. It stayed within the same business model for years, even though for years it had pointed to a decline, but it didn't evolve. The one that did evolve was Nordstrom. And I think about the Nordstrom's local as an example, and those are starting to pop up everywhere to meet the customer demand on where they are. For the returns as well as like alterations, like they're going into communities to meet the customer, but they're not necessarily their big box stores. I think that makes a ton of sense. So I think if a retailer has the right business model framework and as well as a strategy, I think long term it's going to be very successful.
Yep. It is about striking that balance. Retailers now actually have more tools at their disposal than ever before. Some of the things that you've been talking about, just meeting the customer where they are and buy online and pick up in store. And in a lot of cases, it just boils down to offering convenience. And one of my top trajectories is what I call the convenience conundrum. The good news is convenience can make price not even matter. The conundrum is different shoppers define convenience differently, depending on all kinds of variables. So what do you think about the state of convenience right now? Are retailers hitting the mark, or what can they do to really bring it on when it comes to convenience?
Well, what was so inspiring to see, I mean, for take it for what it is, COVID has been really tough on the retail industry in total. But what was inspiring to see was the significant pivot that happened when retailers said we can't operate the way that we always have, and we've got to meet the customer where they are to continue to help our business survive. And when you think about things like curbside pickup, specialty retail was not doing curbside pickup. That was not a norm. And that was a quick pivot having when all the stores ended up shutting down, which is say we still have to thrive here and what do we need to do? And you saw that happen in the industry, which I think starts to beg the question, which is what is convenience? And convenience for the customer is what is the product and how fast can I get it? And what am I willing to pay for? Or what am I willing to not? I think if look at shipping as an example, if there is just the 5 to 7 day window, the consumer expects that that is free shipping. Grocery store, nobody's going to say, I want to wait, 48 hours for my groceries. Like, I know I need my groceries today. How fast can I get my groceries? I want to make an order and I want to pick it up today. So I think it just depends on the business, the model, but also that all retailers need to look at their holistic brick and mortar experience to say, what are we offering? And is there anything we're missing to get the demand of the customer, to get our product into the customer as fast as they need it?
Yeah. And to your point, too, it's unique to the categories that you're selling. You can't say that the rules for grocery apply to fashion. So I think that makes it really tough for these multi-category operators because they have to juggle all of that.
Absolutely. And the other one thing that's been on my mind is look at the industry and we're in holiday is with more business going to online and more shipping happening, thinking about making sure that the demand on shipping that we meet that the retailers meet the timeline. So I think that's going to be really important. And then I don't know that we've unlocked returns, to be honest. I think returns are still somewhat of a pain point for the customer, although they can ship them back and they can print labels. I think there's still room to figure out how to make that more convenient and easy for the customer to give the product back and to get their money back if the product doesn't work.
What else do you think can be done on the returns front? Because it certainly is a big pain point for retailers and can be a big frustration point for shoppers.
I think about I think about having your own courier service as an example for retailers. This is probably going to be costly, but if there was a courier service that was so simple to say, like with your product comes an easy way to like a return label, and then I'll come pick it up for you so that it's simple versus having to schedule it, take it to the UPS, mail it at the post office. Like, how does the customer not have to leave their home to make it so simple that it just gets picked up? And I think about how does maybe an email goes out and says, "How was your purchase today?" And it was like, "Oh, I'd like to return it." It was like, "Oh, here's your label, and we've scheduled your pickup." Super easy, but then the customer doesn't have to leave their home in order to do that. And it's all taken care of for them.
Well, that's an interesting opportunity. Perhaps retailers are just so focused on making the sale a one-step accommodation in returns that puts the burden on the consumer. Maybe they haven't thought that all the way through in terms of how they can even make returns much more of a meet the customer where they are proposition, and particularly during COVID.
And I think that with if I thought about that as being a mom and a businesswoman and a wife and all the other things that we do in our lives, if someone made that easy, I would be more apt to shop with them more frequently. Because I wouldn't have to worry about returns piling up in the corner and I've got to get them shipped out, or there's a expired return policy that I didn't meet, or like I don't know that we've quite unlocked that portion of the customer journey. It may seem not fully profitable because we've made the sale, but I think in the long run, by getting the loyalty through convenience and another aspect, I actually think that profit will pay for itself in loyalty and repurchase.
And just thinking long term about it, not just in terms of an individual product profitability.
Right, exactly.
Well, you mentioned loyalty. Depending on who you ask, loyalty is completely dead. People will say that retail's just a grab what you can, purely opportunistic business these days. But others still say that loyalty isn't only possible, but that it's very achievable, especially with all the new tools that retailers have and data and so on to really personalize the experience. So where do you sit on the loyalty equation? Is it achievable, or is it something you just grab what you can get?
Oh, I laugh because I'm like, am I on the fence? I might be on the fence here. Because I think you think about like Kohl's and Kohl's Cash. There is a true loyal following there, and how they promote and how they drive traffic is all through, it's the infrastructure of the business. But I've also seen the flip side where there is a loyalty program, but when business gets tough, it's actually so over indexed that it dilutes the purpose of the program. And then it loses its specialness, quite honestly. And so I think that in order for it to work, it has to be meaningful. It has to have a really good, it has to be easy. I don't think it's fully dead. I just don't know that it's been unlocked the way that it should be fully yet, is what I would say.
Well, and then there are some of the soft aspects of driving loyalty, and then there are actual loyalty programs that can become overloaded. These loyalty programs and apps sometimes can just get really cluttered to the point where shoppers don't even know the benefits of what they're getting.
Yeah, and think about email. I was talking with a peer of mine in the industry, and it was Black Friday. It was all week last week, and the amount of email that was sent was, I mean, it was so much to sort through, actually, that it became overwhelming. So the way in which brands are communicating with customers, I think, also has to be looked at, because just sending emails, watching the click throughs, I don't know that that's always going to get the loyalty. It may actually just seem overwhelming, especially when you're getting 3 or 4 a day from certain brands.
Saw a comic the other day that was so funny. It said, "I love this sweater, but do I love it enough to get an email every day for the next 40 years?"
Right. It's true. There's this way of like, how do we think about, I think with the online journey itself, like we've got the websites, we've got the flow through and the purchasing through the website, and we've got the email. But what's next of the true communication on how you connect with the customer as an individual versus just the digital way of like pushing content? So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked about categories and the differences in categories and how different categories call for different approaches. COVID has really dinged discretionary categories like apparel and accessories and jewelry. You have so much experience driving these categories. What are your thoughts on what retailers can do when these big shifts away from certain categories happen? Can they do anything in all of these COVID era dynamics?
What I start to think about here is the product pipeline and how much lead time you need in some of our specialty retailers to pivot the product. Because what happened with COVID, it was all of a sudden we're going to the office. Now all of a sudden we're staying home. And you saw actually an uptick in categories like, athletic wear, fleece, sweatshirts, more casual wear. So for those brands that were not that, it's taken a bit to pivot because the pipeline is so long. And so I think it just begs the question of how fast can you read what's happening within the industry and pivot your product pipeline, but not lose your brand identity, because I think there's risk there as well. Um, and you think about a classic retailer, but that can still do casual wear, but what does casual wear mean to them is what I would think about. But I don't think that apparel is fully gone. I was talking to a friend and she was telling me that I haven't spent less money. I've just spent it differently because I have more athletic pants than I have jeans now. And I was like, well, that makes sense because we're not getting out of the house as often, or we're going for long walks, right? We're not going to the office. And so I think that makes sense to me. But keeping your brand identity, pivoting to where the customer is, and making sure that you have a pipeline that can adjust based on industry trend is really important.
Well, I think you had a really great takeaway. Don't do it to such a degree that you lose your brand identity, because if you're just chasing, you can be stepping out of bounds and maybe even compromising your brand.
Absolutely. And, think about, we've seen that even before COVID. We've seen specialty retailers try to chase trends, but not be true to their identity and lose their core customer base. And so I think while you're trying to grow new customers or meeting demand based on trend, you still have to remember your core, and always sticking to the core and maybe evolving the core, but not losing it is important, especially in apparel retail.
Yeah, what a balancing act, right?
Yeah. And also, that's where merchants are so important because they're making these big decisions. But you also have to take risks. And so being a really great merchant in apparel retail, whether it's accessories or jewelry or anything, is understanding like gut instinct, facts, and making some big bets on things that, could be good for the brand and the evolution of it as well.
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because right now retail is so relentlessly productivity driven. The data is amazing, and now retailers really know what to do with it. Sometimes that human touch and that gut instinct and that true merchant sensibility can get left out of the equation. But it sounds like you're saying you have to have that factored in as well. An algorithm isn't going to solve everything.
No, an algorithm is not. I think that's guidance. It's like facts and feelings need to come together in order to make really good decisions. And some of those bets have been great, some of them might not be. But if we always geared product on last year's results, I don't think we'd ever evolve as brands. And so there is using the facts, but then there's also using the merchant instinct, which I think is highly covetable now.
Yes, absolutely. It's good to hear that, because there's always rumblings about those types of positions being replaceable. But to your point, it's about balancing the two out.
It's the creative piece that's so important with the science.
Yep. Art and science.
Exactly.
When we talk about this multi-channel environment, retailers are always talking about having a single view of the customer, being able to track the customer journey between channels, having the right product go to the right person at the right time. Do you think there have been some big advances in that regard, or is it just sort of a pipe dream to make that happen?
No, there's a lot of technology I know that is built into making that happen. And that's between like the buys online, the assortment into the stores, and then the replenishment systems that happen as well. But I think in order for it to really make sense, it's exactly what we were just talking about, which is the art and the science. So in my background, we've definitely had a lot of view of the facts, there's no shortage of analysis and also no shortage of technology in order to make the allocation happen to the appropriate place. What I think is so important, though, is the relationships that are even harder to do now because we're all working from home, but that on the ground feedback of what we're seeing in stores, what we're hearing from the customer, balanced with the data and the allocation tools to make the best decisions is where the true allocation formula I think comes to play and will be most successful. If departments within an infrastructure are working siloed, that's a really scary place to be, because you can't, not everything on paper is always what you see in stores or online.
That's a great point, too, particularly when you talk about the new role of the store, digitally native brands opening stores, marrying all of those different channels together, not putting them in silos, and making sure that information is being shared. You would think that all of those silos have been broken down within retail organizations, but there's still some legacy players out there that just haven't done that work.
Right, you have to build in like there's this like informal and formal way to do that. And knowing that they're both equally important to make the best decision. Some of the best business partners that I've ever worked with, we've been able to work really, really closely and have this good, push and pull of both to come up with the best outcome, because of our vantage point of where we sit, and that helps the total organization.
Turning to another topic that just isn't going away in retail, sustainability. Every retailer now knows that they can no longer just check boxes. It can't just be a PR play. Where do you see sustainability going, and consumer side or some opportunities for retailers?
I think that it is becoming a decision point for the consumer, especially the younger generations. And so and I think it's taking a bit too long in the retail industry to make significant shifts. You could see like basically this year we saw so many retailers come out with like, this is our sustainability plan and it's 5 years, in some cases 10 years. And that is great, but the measurement of that is like, what could you do today? Like, what can be done now? How fast can we push small wins in order to make big impact? And I think that we could move a little bit faster here, and especially to attract the younger generation, which is going to be our future consumer. Even and their legacy retailers are actually where I'd put most of the pressure for change, because that consumer may vote to shop elsewhere because they'll see their footprint on the environment as not favorable.
I love your comment on small wins making a big impact and the opportunity for maybe legacy retailers to take that approach.
Well, sometimes it's like we overthink it too much, right? It's like why not just like get recycling bins or bring back product and be able to say, I think Uniqlo did something really cool, which is you bring back our product and we're going to reuse it to make new product. And I mean, that's a way that most retailers can just start thinking about. How do you put an infrastructure to do that? We don't need to source more yarn. We don't need to source more fabric. We actually could get it from donations, or there's, I think, a small pay. I'm not sure, but that can happen. It's just being innovative with making an impact for the environment.
You can just DIY some of that without, to your point, overthinking it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, you had mentioned before, you talked about the opportunity with returns, particularly during the holiday shopping season. Do you have any other thoughts on what's happening this holiday? I mean, arguably, we're on the other side of it with Black Friday behind us. Do you have any predictions, any words of advice as retailers continue to navigate through the season?
I would say what comes to my mind is stay optimistic. I think Black Friday we're going to learn a lot of Black Friday. And maybe Black Friday, for years now, Black Friday has shifted to either earlier or spread out further into the season. And I think that we have to look at the total October, November, December retail season, holiday season differently than we ever have before. I think more obvious, based on the trends that we've already seen this year, the consumer is going to shop more online. I've heard from many people their shopping's actually already done, which I can't validate that with fact. I thought that was interesting because they did it all online. And so for brick and mortar spaces, I think it's important that every customer walking into a store probably has the intent to purchase. How do you help them purchase within the store? I think that's most important for brick and mortar.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to convenience and maybe even the way convenience is redefined during COVID. On one side, retailers don't want throngs of people stampeding the stores, but you don't want to hear crickets either, do you?
No. And everyone, like I said, everyone that comes in, it's like they're coming in for an experience. If people are saying, I'm going to leave my house and I'm going to go into a store to shop, the important thing for brick and mortar right now is to say, how can I help you find what you're looking for? It's more intentional now than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Intentional. That's definitely a key word. I end every Voices of Retail Next interview with one question that I'll pose to you right now to answer any way you like. What's next?
I would say retail is here to stay. It's just how we retail is changing. The relationship between online and brick and mortar has got to be symbiotic, and convenience will continue to evolve. And so, as a retailer, I'm thinking about trying to see around corners, anticipate what could be coming up ahead, maintaining and driving business today, but also thinking about the future.
I love that. And that's really what it's all about. Not being afraid to stay in the here and now and not always maybe lunging at shiny objects, right?
Exactly. And I put like now, if we're going to be disruptive, now's the time to get disruptive. Our lives are disruptive. So it's time to try things. It's trying to put new initiatives in, but it's also time to stick with your foundation of your core business because that will help ultimately drive profit as well.
That's such a great point. I love that during times of great disruption is a time to be a disruptor. That's when you should take the risks.
Exactly. Yeah. It just seems like there's permission, if you will. We've been given permission.
You now have permission to blow everything up.
Yeah. But don't lose your foundation because that's also important.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the whole thing comes crashing down.
Exactly. Yes. You can't have the house without the cement.
Courtney, thank you so much for joining us today. What a great conversation about so many topics. You just have such a breadth of knowledge about retail, and I really appreciate you sharing some of your insights today and helping us see around the corner. And I hope to follow what you're doing at the RealReal, such an innovative company, and really look forward to talking with you after the holiday season and seeing how everything wraps up.
I thank you so much. It has been such a fun way to spend time on a Monday. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. On that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of Spieckerman Speaks Retail. If you want to reach out to Courtney, you can reach her on LinkedIn, Courtney Hawkins. Such a great guest. And in future episodes, I'm going to be talking with some more smart folks who are going to help us understand what's really happening in retail, what we should be focusing on. We're going to continue to track those retail trajectories and this permanently unique holiday season. So I hope that you'll continue to listen in every other Thursday. Our next episode is going to break on December 17th. And in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Retail Expert, XPERT. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.